I'm looking forward to hearing you, David.
Oh, and vice versa.
Yeah, but
Welcome. Welcome to the Poetry Flash virtual reading series. I'm Joyce Jenkins, Poetry Flash editor and director, beaming to you from the Poetry Flash office in Berkeley, California. And today we are very pleased to present Susan Kelly-Dewitt and David Woo. There are 2 book links in the chat box, one to purchase Gravitational Tug, Susan Kelly-Dewitt's brand new book from the Main Street Rag bookstore, and another link to University of Georgia Press, where you can pre-order David Woo's Divine Fire to be released March 2021. Please continue to check out poetryflash.org for reviews and interviews, David Shattuck's Poetry and Healing column, and more. To sign up for our event emails, scroll down on the front page to join our mailing list. Here to introduce our poets is Richard Silberg, Poetry Flash Associate Editor.
Hi, David. Veterans of our series have heard me talk about Stegner Fellows, the golden tribe of Stegner Fellows, because they've given us so many wonderful poetry readings. Both David Woo and Susan Kelly-Dewitt are ex-Stegner Fellows, former Stegner Fellows, and we are so pleased to have their wonderful poetry tonight. David is going to be reading first. Divine Fire, Joyce told you it's forthcoming in March 2020. This is his second book. His first book was The Eclipses. And this book, Divine Fire, is an impressive, and I must say, a mysterious book, a really mysterious book. It's marked by everything, a skillful, even majestic march of the language. I think I'm going out on a limb here, but I think that there's an overall theme of the distance between the level of the gods and the ruinous level of our own little human sphere here. There are 2 Divine Fire poems, each poems of dying. And they're probably too long for David to read to you tonight. But just listen, majestic, mysterious, and captivating. Let's give a flurry of jazz hands for David Woo.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was a wonderful introduction. And thank you to Joyce Jenkins and Claire and Poetry Flash, as well as my friend from my Stegner days, Susan Kelly-Dewitt, my old comrade. It's so wonderful to be part of Poetry Flash, which is such a great institution in the Bay Area, supporting, the literary arts there. You're so lucky to have it there. The first poem that I'm reading is actually the opening poem from my new book, Divine Fire. And one of the things that interests me is the way consciousness, time, identity, love, all the important things feel like from the inside. I mean, I don't think that's anything unusual for a poet. For example, with the notion of time, what I was as a child often coexists with what I am now. It's not quite like what Wordsworth said about the child as father of the man. It's more like the child is still playing inside me when I go outside and I see him playing in the yard, or he's still dreaming in my bed. This poem is called Ambient Life. You've invited some friends over for dinner, and each of them has brought along one or two friends who each brought one or two more until the room is crowded and senseless, and the roast is being hacked and impaled on toothpicks as makeshift hors d'oeuvres, and wine glasses blithely tossed into the fireplace, and a drunken stranger is cavorting on a giant mobile outside your bedroom window. By now, you've given up trying to control anyone. You lie in bed, listening to the sounds of a party that is nonsensical to you and brings you no pleasure. A police siren comes closer and closer, then Dopplers into silence. The hydraulics of a bus sighs rudely. A washing machine merges into a pack of feral dogs. I meant to ask you a question at the party, but I see now that you're tucked in, except for the pajamas with bunny feet that peek out from under the covers. How small you are, how helpless. I kiss you goodnight, once on each eye, and wipe away the last tears from your lifelong tantrum. Then I close the door slowly, slowly, to avoid making any noise. My late mother was a sort of a classic Chinese immigrant mother. She used to give me $1 for each A that I got on my report card, and would sort of mildly berate me if I didn't get an A. It wasn't until later that I realized that things like grades and educational background and, I don't know, vocabulary and enunciation weren't necessarily markers of intelligence. And it was even later that I understood how complicated intelligence really was. And at some point it dawned on me that it was ridiculous to even think in those terms, because even if you were in the top 1% of the world, I mean, there are 8 billion people, you would still only be in the top 80 million people in the world. So, and yet I think we still do use terms like smart and intelligent to judge people. And we do look at that when we look at other people. There are 2 references in this poem. The first one is to an Ugarit tablet, which refers to the ancient tablet that contains the oldest song. And it's from Syria, what is now Syria, from ancient Mesopotamia, like 15th century BCE. And the other reference is to GNZ11, which is the most distant object in the universe. And it's a galaxy that the Hubble telescope found that's 37 billion light years away. This is called On the Superior Intelligence of Others. They look at you, the gods, knowing what you think before you do. And like a god, you mustn't show your ignorance. Be perceptive, because what matters is that you know the names of songs of stars. They see into the ancient tablet the melody it hums. They see into the lens the red-shifted implication. They would interpret your blank stare as they look at you, knowing what you don't know before you can learn it. They know the patterns of social recognition, the embattled aspiration of your natural narcissism towards furtiveness or denial. as if what matters is that I know the names of songs or stars. True, the facts matter less than the larger picture, even if the larger picture is a refuge to which you withdraw as into a dark cave without shadows, far from the eyes of those who look at you, knowing you before you do. The gods would strike you down for your ignorance, however culpable, however aleatory, because everything you don't know is evidence of disbelief, the narrowness that ignores the origins of songs and stars. I'm not smarter than you. How can you judge such things? You know things I don't know, and vice versa. They're as insecure as you, the solipsists who stare like false idols, miming prescience of what you think and do, lisping arcana, Ugarit tablet, GNZ 11, to belittle your songs and stars. During the course of my life, I've watched the romantic and erotic centers of especially gay culture change from bars and saunas and personal ads to chat rooms and dating apps and hookup apps. But what remains constant is sort of a moral question, as well as an erotic question, I guess, is where does all this pursuit, this being on the make, lead? Is it only for the sensual moment at the end? When, if ever, do I stop being on the make in order to connect with someone else? Or is connection itself a form of being on the make? This is a poem called On Refusing to Be on the Make. If I had turned around at the right time and seen what was behind me, I would know what my actions meant, that everything served the same cause and was known to serve the same cause, as if I were transparent and could see motives flowing through me like a picture frame held over a trout-filled stream. Now I must go on walking and walking along these blind paths where dreams no longer exist because the self itself has gone clear. On the bridge in autumn, leaves are falling from trees I can no longer see. Lovers are holding hands that carry invisible photo albums of the families they will never have. But I am walking on for once without questioning what lies behind. As for the future, how can I help but judge you by how gracefully you brush aside the falling leaves, or how selflessly you turn to me and remove one clinging to the small of my back. The extent to which we know about other people's inner lives, including whether or not someone is in love with you or what they're thinking about you, that obviously depends on words and actions, but it also depends on gestures and facial expressions and all of the body language that is actually very, very uncertain. Susan Sontag wrote something really sort of interesting in one of her journals. She said, if the outside corresponded to the inner life in people, we couldn't have bodies as we do. The inner life is too complex, too various, too fluid. Our bodies incarnate only a fraction of our inner lives. But I was thinking about the animals, the cuttlefish and the octopus, and how their skins blend in with backgrounds, and they're extremely complicated ways. They can look like rocks, and lights can flow over their skin when they're emotionally upset even. And I thought about that in relationship to the inner life. This poem is called On the Skin of the Cuttlefish. If my words shivered over my skin, shimmered back as moire, as pointillé, in crinkled foil layers of blue sequined chitin, or embulbed themselves like lights along the length of my torso, scurfed and burning in oscillate riffles of embodied syntax, like a flowing installation by Jenny Holzer. If irony was forbidden and subtext, if meaning was meaning alone in the eloquence of the flesh, its electric siren song, its poignant interference pattern of appetite, of rage, of tenderness, if my colors betrayed my feeling before I knew what I had felt, each color telling the history of my affections, the noblesse oblige of ochre, the learned helplessness of crimson, how my skin's muscled chromatophores contracted round the hues and tints of your body, how my green blue blood murmured our love in infinite permutation, high and low, in tidal swell and mangrove swamp, among the brain coral and on the feather down coral bed. I would wish for surface, for my fathoms to plumb a shallow strand. I would covet no inner life, no enigma of otherness, no touchstone of alienation, only the pulse arrow of desire expelled from flesh, telling us all we knew of the other, raw, fleeting, and forever skin deep. In the novel Giovanni's Room, James Baldwin, who of course was both gay and African-American, he wrote in the voice of a closeted white man, and his narrator says, my face is like a face you have seen many times. My ancestors conquered a continent, pushing across death-laden plains until they came to an ocean which faced away from Europe into a darker past. His book was an act of radical, I think it was radical empathy. And the darker past was in part the history of Baldwin's own people, whose story he chose to take a break from to tell the story of his white characters. It strikes me today that multiple forms of this kind of radical empathy are still what we need, even with people who refuse empathy and who consider it a weakness. In a sense, it's not for them that we are empathetic, but for us, that we're trying to enable ourselves to imagine how their consciousness would change in order to make life better for all of us. This poem is called Darker. Darker. There was a time that was easeful to the mind. You didn't have to think, you just did or were. You got on a train and there you were. You went to work and there you were. The architecture of the building was yours, and the boss may have been exigent, but he was yours. Certainly the neighbors were yours, and the newspapers were filled with you. If you liked arts and books, they were always yours. If you liked sports, the players and the coaches and the rules were nothing but you at your golden best. If you were thoughtless, you could sit in an easy chair knowing the TV would smile its Gorgon smile and to scourge images of you and you and you. And your wife, who else could she be but yours, in every turn of her apron, in every turn of her duster on the banister, in every pliant turn in bed. Thought is the enemy, or the thought that represses a thought. To be self-conscious, to go through life assessing each habit, phrase, way of looking, to know that the neutral expression on your face will always be misconstrued as scornful or insufficiently respectful, to avoid being the other in the room, to avoid saying the one thing that would surround you in a fetid cloud of loathing, to have to think not to think. Look at your hand. Isn't it changing from all the repression? Look at your face. That isn't a 5 o'clock shadow, but something deeper and more permanent. Something, dare I say it, darker, darker, something you can never scrub off. I thought I would take a break from more political poems by reading a couple of love poems, since I think we're all tired with the endless, still ongoing election that is happening. But since I wrote these love poems, they're not really chipper love poems. They actually go back to what I was saying before about the way time feels within the stream of consciousness. That is something fractured and recombined, something like a very weird, endless movie in which you're both the film and the audience. Sequel. They are gazing at the movies from the lawn, their eyes in unison, following the man who kisses the woman who kisses him back, then slaps him across the face with such force the breeze rustles the screen, which turns out to be the curtain of your bedroom, where you look out at the strange faces in the yard, the woman weeping over what you have done, the angry man rustling through the leaves as he storms away, and the child among them who doesn't understand and doesn't care, but who stares at your features and those of your lover reclining behind you, asleep or dead or dying, as if to memorize them for the day he's old enough to enact the story himself, repeating your mistakes, making a few of his own until the lights come up and the audience trickles away. The next poem is a love poem told from the point of view of Sebastian in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, but it's sort of a modern day or modern costume version of Shakespeare, I would say. And in that play, if you remember, Antonio was his friend who loved him so much that he followed him to a country where he knew that he could be arrested and executed. And he's almost executed until Sebastian manages to save him. But Sebastian really doesn't care that much, actually. He lets him come along anyway, partly because he doesn't really notice. He's in the mood for love with someone else. This is called For Love After Twelfth Night. The air that ranges over the present without judgment, the sun that picks the gillyflower and oxlip gold, the casement ensphered in the lit orb of a pearl. I cannot reach for love, I cannot touch for love. The glass would cut my hand and the sun would burn my petals and air would judge my folly with a gust. Even at the elephant searching for Antonio, I wandered the cobblestone of the inn-yard, hearing no words issue from the actors' mouths, no sizzle from the torches, no holla from the vintner. Antonio passed through me, searching for me. I was ghosted for love. Outside, the black taxi took me along the river, and I, fingering all along the jewel in my pocket, saw a tableau of decay, fall of buildings, bombs, pendulum of wrecking balls, then the rise of cranes, of steel girder acrobats, beyond the gaze of a mere taxi window. How clear you'd become, backlit with stars, in a blue high-rise, fixed darkly on the fulcrum of our nakedness. If I lower the curtain here, we will never be clothed. My parents, as I mentioned, were immigrants who came almost penniless from China, and through dint of hard work and frugality, they made a home for themselves in America, in Arizona. In fact, in this house that I have inherited from them, it's across the street, or it's pretty close to this huge mansion on the hill that the chewing gum magnate Wrigley built. And back then, this was all desert. And basically all the flatlands were filled in around the mansion, and we're on the flatlands. But my parents considered it quite a success to be on the flatlands, and I think they were. Often when I see immigrants on the streets, I think of my parents who, even though they felt themselves to be Americans and felt themselves to be successful here in their way, never really, I would say all of their friends were other immigrants from the same village. And in the end, they were still outsiders with their accents and their skin color and their different customs. And most immigrants are similar today. The vast majority just want to make a living for their families. This poem is about immigrant workers in the Southwest, but I think it could be about most immigrants across the country who enter suburban lives only as the gardener or the worker who comes on Monday mornings and blows the leaves around the swimming pool into garbage bags and then takes them home with him to deposit into the junkyard way at the edges of the city. This is called The Leaf Blower Among the Swimming Pool Lights. From inside your headphones, behind the churring decibels, the white rumble of stars, syncopation of falling stars, the artifice of a blue cosmos in illuminated water. You are late for home, late for the mangoes and the rice. Each movement you make parts another family's serenity, parts it and restores it to the clear side a pyramid of leaves. Chaise longue, splayed oak, sprinklers, translucent gravity. Is it for them you bind exigencies with a bow and release to thoughtless pastoral the flat green essence of a lawn? If inside you is a blue pool full of stars, it is never yours. You own only the specter of coins in someone else's yard, a garden's footlights, a blue moon, a watery constellation. Who is she but your young wife holding aloft a scalloped shell of marble spilling water in the dusk? You would hold her, and in the vigil of your arms, you too would vanquish the dust of the world by carting it closer to where she awaits you, owning it, inhabiting it, with her, aside her, at the dusty pale of the city, dove-shot, sleeking and spinning a bright tin can. And now for my last poem, I thought I'd read a poem that goes back to the present moment, which seems to be a series of endless catastrophes, to be honest. A lot of people think there's been a terror in reality. In my own state, in Arizona, we've had the most days over 110 in 1 year ever in recorded history, and also the most days over 100 as well. And I know that my beloved Bay Area was in a shroud of darkness recently. And of course, we're now all suffering from the third peak of the pandemic, which some countries, especially in Asia, are figuring out a way to overcome, to avoid. But anyway, despite all these blips in the news, I think all catastrophes are ultimately local and personal. And I think you have to remember that. For me, the greatest loss in my life has been, I think, probably the death of my mother. So when I think about apocalypse, it's not hard for me to start thinking also about her as well. This poem is called Q. Behind you, a line has formed of the lost, the lowly, the desperate. They stretch back along the shore beyond the fading cliffs. The wind-up emergency radio in your hands tells you to stay calm. Help is on its way. The tide will not come in for hours, but already it is wetting your bare feet. You help the woman next to you, rolling her wheelchair a few feet closer to the highway. She looks up with an expression of gratitude and fear as a line of speeding fire trucks swerves narrowly on her left, blowing her chair sidelong with the force of their passing. You tell her not to worry, but now the sea has drawn closer and everyone is crowded on the narrow strip of sand by the highway. Soon it is dark and you can hear from behind the cries of people and the roar of trucks. And you know soon it will be a massacre. Soon you'll be the only able-bodied person who can rescue the injured and dying. You wind the radio, but it only repeats the words, "Do not panic, help will come." And the woman in the wheelchair, her face hidden in the darkness, whispers in your late mother's sing-song voice, "You're wrong. You know what you can bear. Be strong. You'll find the reason you're here." Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Our second reader, is Susan Kelly-Dewitt. Her new book, Gravitational Tug. There are 9 previous books. She's also, let me say, a noted critic, part of the National Book Critics Circle and Northern California Book Reviewers Association, and contributing editor for our own Poetry Flash. I think that for me, the
Louder if you can.
I think that for me, the thrust of this book can be taken from Gravitational Tug, from the title poem, in which there's a lot going on, a serpentine universe. The painter Georgia O'Keeffe makes a bit entrance, but the key is how there's a gravitational tug on each least thing. And it's not, it isn't that everything is lovey-dovey, tugging each other. Actually, the poet is being tugged back into decomposition by what's around her. And she ends saying, "Soon enough." But the book goes to talking about each least thing beautifully, finding what there is to poetically note in each least thing. For instance, the beginning poem, Ode to Brother Roach, which is slinky, creepy, roachy, but also Jewel, the brother Jewel, Slinky Roach. There's a beautiful Neruda type question poem. The book also ends with a poem titled Neruda, finishing with rich questions that are offered. And just quickly, there's a poem that strikes me. I have no idea if Susan will want to read it, but a poem about to a stranger on a bus in 1968. And there's such a delicate touching between strangers in that poem. And I count only one family, one love poem, waking at night to her husband, blessedly full of life and breath. But each of these least things is poetically caught and made gravitationally magnificent. So let's give her a warm welcome. Let's give her a flutter of jazz hands. Susan Kelly-Dewitt.
I just unmuted myself. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, okay. Thanks for that lovely introduction. Thanks for reading with me, David Woo. It's so good to hear your poems and looking forward to your book. And I just want to say before I start, I see that some people are in the audience who have heard me read from this book before, so forgive me if I repeat myself. I'm not going to talk too much as I go through this. I'm going to just kind of want to read a number of the poems, and I'll start actually with the first poem, which is Ode to Brother Roach. I did grow up in Hawaii as a little kid with big insects all around me, so insects have always been, I like to think of myself as the bug bard. So Ode to Brother Roach. Little polished rump of mud, your wings are useless as the old archangels. All night the rain pelts down on your fumy house. You are the garbage heap's midnight eye, all dark oil. You are the dirty jewel, the cursed black pearl hidden in the opalescent walls of morning. Slippery brother, you are the secret bead in the rosary of reviled things. Feeling cowed by language in the night. Everything types its obscure message. Cat claws ripping up the welcome ivy on the hemp doormat so the good intentions of visitors fray. Moth wings unfolding neat inverted V's to bat at the lit porch lamp. Even the dim orb weaver is a cartwheeling X in one dark corner, its spinnerets pasting gnats into fat white O's. I'm dumb as rock under flowered sheets. Particulars unspell me. Even the cotton eye of the blossom's carmine dye washes out a faded sun of the unsaid. 100 count threads snip loose in my head, each a little tale of the unwritten. Street musician. His tune began in Bali. That's where he hid his heart. That's where he pulled on his hat and buttoned the 4 gold buttons of his tunic. That's where he chose his art and decided on this impossible posture, left leg splayed out straight like clean break. His hands are white gloves and his face wears that pallor ghosts in old countries powder on, though his lips are red as dahlias. If I listen with my spirit's off ear, the song he plays approaches on bare feet. So I'm reading the first few poems in the book sort of without skipping. Falling asleep. I hear the so-called celestial music, the symphony of spheres swelling like a sonorous vein at my temple, the prayer wheels of the universe spinning off audible chorales. And I try to shake myself free of the wonder. Am I sane? I lift my shadow hand up into the dark and see a halo like pale fireflies or luciferous fish, a nebula cloud rimming my fingers, natural bottom dwellers by day, held up in a Baya mudra, abeyance of fear gesture, and I blink, try to blink it all away, and it does go. It vanishes, but comes back as memory, as ghost fire. This is the poem that Richard mentioned, one of them. It's called Poem Built Entirely of Questions and Couplets after Neruda. Neruda, I spent a lot of time with Neruda over the years, and So poem built entirely of questions and couplets. Who wrote the expository essay of the sky? If the sun is our instructor, what grade will it give us? Who is the dean of the galaxies? Who are the regents of black light? And what is our moon revising with its white reflective pen? Is it composing a love poem or a lament? How many desert islands in the mind at 7 minutes until death? If we pry open the mouth of night, will we find 2 rows of uneven teeth? Isn't that what the old religions meant by the devourer? Who will the dolphins vote for on election day? How will the sharks cast their ballots? Will the grains of sand along the shore stand up to be counted? The same old sly barracudas fix the results once again? What is that tunnel of white light the fresh from the dead claim to have seen? How many watts is it at peak load? And when it burns out, who will replace the bulb? Who booked our passage to the graveyard? Is it true there is a border wall and we'll be lost there without a passport? On 9/11, I was on my way to visit my daughter. I was in the air at 6 a.m. to visit my daughter in Manhattan. And when we got the news and ended up landing in San Francisco and going through hours and hours of terror. That weekend after 9/11, the first Saturday, we went to the farmer's market here in Sacramento. So this is Farmer's Market, September 16th, 2001. We caught the scent of fresh lavender wands used for calming, along with the pervasive aroma of basil, the spiced fern whiffs of dill, the mix of peaches and torpedo onions, and later, at the crowded end of the aisles, the seawater pungency of fish, mostly salmon. The glazed eyes of the fish stared out blankly from their beds of crushed ice. We gazed seriously into one, unable to penetrate the isinglass surface where our own faces floated like trilobites in stone. Even the roses, not hothouse, but grown indoors in a family garden, laminated photos as proof in the vendor's stall, could not enliven the crowd's quiet mood. Most of us still tuned to the week of TV news, those images of the burning towers, the planes vanishing into them, and the fragmented bodies in Sunday church clothes. In wheelchairs, in strollers, we jostled and buffeted, speaking English, Tagalog, Spanish, Mandarin, Farsi, bumping hips, knocking elbows cordially, wedging ourselves peacefully in to search for the ripest local honeydews, the fattest big boys, the plumpest figs. You know, I have to say, I'm almost gonna cry reading it myself, even though it's my poem. I'm just getting goose flesh reading it again. Huh. And tectonic. My geography is spread open before you, the map of stones, the gutted hills. Don't call me flood of moonlight or great calm pasture. I am the train that rattles your windows all night, the crowded tunnel leading to the empty passageway, the black labyrinth of forgetting. I am not a bouquet of white lilies today, or a vase of polar star roses. No, I am the coldest morning, the longest, frostiest night in hell. I am an old flag today, faded glories. Call me Mr. President or inmate number 999. I weigh like evidence. The nuclear warhead praying ardently for peace, the cooling towers, the toxic dump site. An omen, a warning, a sign. A river rising silently, nervous tongue of water. Don't label me an amateur naturalist of suffering. I am the round seed of mystery with murder at its center, the house of convicted laments. Medicine, 3 a.m. Shantideva says, whatever happens, I will not let my truthfulness be disturbed. I should say, I'm going to start again. I refer to a poet in this, and the poet is Jane Kenyon. Medicine, 3 a.m. Shantideva says, whatever happens, I will not let my cheerfulness be disturbed. Being unhappy won't get me anywhere and will dissipate my goodness. Sambhava says, why say the search is futile? Thought and liberation exist simultaneously. Why say all medicines are impotent? This awareness is the medicine. Why say I don't know? The quiet voice of one poet tells me, there is a moment in middle age when you grow bored, angered by your middling mind, afraid. The image she offers is that of a spoiled pear, the shadow of ruin spreading through the ripened flesh from inside. Nothing is settled. Thank God, my beloved sleeps beside me, brimming with life and breath. Poem to the Stranger on the Greyhound Bus, 1968. We traveled together for hours, barely touching elbows. You were broke, running from home. Your big bony knuckles showed through the freckled skin of your hands as they clutched the battered satchel on your lap. Remember? History was the isolate darkness all around us, the watery ghost lights of the fishing boats off the coast highway, like those flares floating in humid air above the rice paddies on TV news. I was on my way south to collect a drunk, my father. We parted wordlessly in the dusky city of angels. Tonight, I write to you beside a vase of white chrysanthemums. I arrange them into this poem for you. I touch their tufts. Resurrection lilies. And the botanical name for these flowers is Lycoris squamagira. Resurrection lilies. An inner ear hears their glug, glug, glug beneath the static of the visible. They're gulping incandescence from a 40-watt bulb, wearing resurrection's shining raiment. Their vegetal souls are praying to Atman. They look away from each other toward the open window, but not in argument. Their plant brains think a blue jay's ravenous squawk is blessing them. They sit in their turquoise jar like swamis, kundalini spines erect, snake charmers charming each other to rise toward the white noise and yellow music of rebirth. As a young person, I spent a lot of time with St. John of the Cross. So this is called Reading St. John of the Cross. How many miles to the border where all the sky there is exists for the soul alone, where the only breathers breathing are constructed from some new electricity and the flowers are made indestructible and messages from the dead arrive like calm white birds with a gift. One more night of spiritual ice and we might all become birds, green birds frozen on a black winter branch. There is a drumming in the shadows under leaves, a million eight-eyed spiders on the march. The buckeyes beat themselves half to death against some lit from within screen. This next poem I've been thinking about yesterday, in fact, because my father was in the Army, and he spent the entire duration of World War II in the South Pacific and was in the Battle of Leyte and the Buna campaign. And so this is called Memento Mori, 1969. Memento Mori, 1969. The lips of strangers blowing like gods into your mouth, crushing the breath back into you, their fists compressing your chest. While you try to tell them 7 men just died in the foxhole, how the grenade blasted you to safety and them to a cold grave in hell. In the night air, they carry you, black watch plaid bathrobe thrown open under the familiar starlight. You try to tell them your dog tags are buried in your bureau drawer. You want them now to hold against animal flesh, then the oxygen mask over your face. What you know you've seen but can't say, the blood-feathered death angel has finally snapped you up, your bones like dry powder in his beak. And this is the title poem of the book, Gravitational Tug. And I do mention the O'Keeffe is Georgia O'Keeffe, the artist in this. Gravitational Tug. What snakes out from the universe is real. It's the road we rake, the path that nabs us with its bloody thumb. The sun is our candle, true, and that night sky all too dark, even with those spangles and waves, with the hurdle of it whipping around us. I had nothing to do but walk into nowhere, O'Keeffe said. Some days it seems entirely whole to me. Others, it's all just spilled powders mixed up, red troubles and abyss. I feel the gravitational tug of each least thing, an ant, a speck of breadcrumb, and I sense how the trees move aside a fraction of an inch, how they want to make me over, rearrange my atoms, scramble the flocks of me into seed or wind or leaf, soon enough. Salmon. They came up the river like a band of slick thieves. The water was thick with their leaping. They climbed together the ladder of rapids, hurled themselves and scraped their bellies. The dead ones floated like pickerel weed. Many fell out of the river of time, littering the rocky banks, drawing the rats, raccoons, and badgers. They filled like windsocks with death. We came there. We carried our eyes and our baggage of witnessing. We carried our awe like a causal fin. The willows crept down to the river's edge and hung their heads like sad old men, trailing all their living silver green leaves, their dusky olive leaves, the color of salmon skin. The beached ones dried in the sun. They poked like stiff flags from the weeds, and the light passing over them seemed disembodied, disemboweled. Somewhere in the worlds between this one and the dead river of salmon ghosts, we heard a howling. O Koho, O Kokani, O Chinook. Directional. My mother hovers at the western ridge. Soon she will vanish like the sun she never became. My father has gone south again, sober this time. When I write him in my mind, I address the letter wistfully to paradise and think of his eyes pecking happiness there, like two blue macaws, the wily toucan of misery freed from the cage in his chest. What we have comes and goes, like the semi jackknifed on the freeway in yesterday's rain that called three souls aside to shiver in the downpour beside their own wounded skin. I am spilling my guts to the wind, contemplating the ruined leaves of October. Dawn-driven, my near friends, the crows, lift in a black tide across the brightening sky as I walk north through the chill. I'm going to jump ahead now in the book toward the end. Yellow-billed magpies. Talky chaplains in a cinema of fields. Bird fame is reeling the milky pod of the money tree back to collect the seed. I study them for free, catalog their viridian sheen, peacock feather, and onyx light. How they drop, spat-winged, pomaded in the middle of flight, as though flight was some bad dream they'd startled awake from. Little Yahwehs in tuxedos, beak. Every day I walk out among them, an unemployed mystic of the tangible, as they hand down their Darwinian laws. I'm going to read three more from this book. And am I doing okay on time? Okay, yeah. Three more from this book. After the Black and White Quilt Show, Richmond Art Center, 1996, and this is a ghazal. A crow lifted from a sycamore. It wasn't a real crow. It carried my life in its mouth and flew north to the snow. When the rain stopped, the knotweed flourished. A rose is a weed in a cornfield, a black wing reminded, a thought flying low. Most quilters slip their name in someplace, often in a corner row where it can't be easily spotted except by those who know real quilting. Last night I ripped it apart, Love Knot 2, underneath Cupid's bow. Puzzlement in the seams, patchwork we needed to sew. I liked the embroidered pieces best, sunflowers and peonies, satin stitched in black, sharps and flats, off-key, showy flowers. Any long love is blind stitched mystery. Your smile was a packet of forget-me-nots I knew I could grow. And I'm going to read two more. The New Bed. A corpulent robin, possibly pregnant. No, its chest is too neon, it's male. On the bird bath's rim, resting himself against a cement cousin, frozen in motion dove who refuses to drink. I've slept in on the new bed, delivered and assembled yesterday by two stout drivers, our fourth life bed, a friend says. Waking impossibly late, though early enough to discover my feathered comrade again, outside the greenhouse window, awash in ferns and white abutilon bells, the sun bombards through thinning ozone. A phone rings next door. I hear my neighbor's heavy footsteps thud across his deck, chasing the fourth ring, snapping it up on the fifth. His swallowed syllables elude like my robin for a scruffy head under, sunlight breaking over the cool spatter of watered molecules tumbling through ruffled feathers, the prismatic scatter of violet and pink wildflowers screen printed across the new bed's sheets. Without conscious effort, we, plant and flesh, leaf and wing, merge in the cosmic plasma, thought and no thought, words and no words. Lao Tzu in my head. Heaven's net casts wide, though its meshes are coarse, nothing slips through. I feel luck on my shoulder this morning. I feel the great web of being brush my cheek, and I try to catch one strand. I probably should end there, but I'm going to read Apple Blossoms. Apple Blossoms. One evening in winter, when nothing has been enough, when the days are too short, the nights too long and cheerless, the secret and docile buds of the apple blossoms begin their quick ascent to light. Night after interminable night, the sugars pucker and swell into green slips, green silks. And just as you find yourself at the end of winter's long, cold rope, the blossoms open like pink thimbles, and that black dollop of shine called bumblebee stumbles in. And I will stop there. Thank you very much. I think I exhausted my 30 minutes, right? Did I exhaust my 30 minutes?
David Woo, Susan Kelly-Dewitt, thank you both so much. You didn't exhaust, you refreshed, Susan. Joyce will close.
Whoops. I just wanted to thank you for reading. It was a wonderful reading. Thanks to everyone who joined us. And a reminder, please check out the chat box for the links for these two wonderful books. Susan Kelly-Dewitt, Gravitational Tug. Look for the link for the Main Street Rag bookstore and find it online if you don't find the link. And for David Woo's forthcoming Divine Fire, University of Georgia Press, you can pre-order it and you will get it on your doorstep in March. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Yay.